Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. As always, whenever you're watching, I hope this sprinkles some joy into your day, some helpfulness into your day. This is video 3 of the video series, How to Break Up with Self-Sabotage in 2022. Thank you so much for still being along for the ride with me. If you are just now jumping into this time, today will still be helpful. Definitely encourage you though to jump back to the first couple of videos just to follow along with us. Some helpful information that I've been dropping thus far, just to give you all a backdrop to this topic. So today, to jump right in, there's going to be more or less 3 main items that we're going to, as quickly as possible, be covering. Firstly, the symptoms and habits of self-destruction. Self-destruction falls underneath the umbrella of self-sabotage. You could say this is how, maybe more specifically, we see self-sabotage show up to some of its further lengths, if you will. And we're going to talk about the reasons for why we actually do self-destructive behavior, why that shows up for us. Secondly, we're going to pinpoint our patterns. So while there are some common behaviors that we'll see in the masses, certainly individually there are going to be some patterns, and it's going to be helpful for us to recognize what our pattern is. So in a situation, whatever a trigger point might be, we'll be able to say, there it is. That's what it is, and interrupt the pattern, if you will. There's a situation, I'm thinking this way, I'm feeling this way, this is what I typically do, but let me make a conscious effort to resist what it is that I always do in situations like this. We'll also talk about getting intimate with our fear, and specifically questions around that. So that way, more specifically, how is it that I recognize the pattern and decide to do something differently? It's helpful to ask myself some questions, really as a dipstick check, to indicate where I'm at. And it's definitely going to be a great exercise for you to consider now, so that, in watching the video series, so that way when you encounter things, which we've all got them, okay, well, I've considered these items, considered these questions, and now I'm equipped, if you will, to pump the brakes on the self-sabotaging behavior when I'm encountered with it. And then finally, how to recommit to new and healthy goals every day. So we'll quickly move through these items. As always, as we're moving through, if you think of anything, please write that down. As we're covering this at a certain point, I'm actually going to mention writing some of these questions down, these items down. Journaling is going to be something that I'm going to mention here in a few minutes. And so definitely encourage you to take advantage, even as we start. If there are things that stick out to you, that resonate with you, writing those things down. If you have questions, definitely encourage you to write those down as well. You can drop those in the comments if you'd like to, or you can direct message me. It's been great. I've had friends, as well as those that have been watching the video, send me direct messages on different platforms once they've seen the video, either to share something that resonates with them or questions that they have. So definitely encourage you, whether it's in the comments or whether you feel like, you know what, I'm probably going to direct message you, definitely encourage you to do so. So to start us off, we'll start to cover the symptoms and habits of self-destruction. And as I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, this really falls under the umbrella of self-sabotaging. The symptoms and habits of self-destruction, they can happen or arise all the time, and they're signs that we are trying to self-sabotage. A few of the behaviors of this, and there are several here, but not just limited to these that are here. Failing to take action, having a negative, pessimistic, or self-defeating mindset. So for example, I'm going to fail, I just know it. Overeating, undereating, forced incompetence. So that could be like portraying ourselves as unintelligent or incapable. Women are more likely to do this than men. Bullying, which means we're going out of our way to cause harm to other people. Self-harm, self-pity, drug and alcohol abuse, deliberately alienating ourselves from others, refusing help, spending too much money, physical neglect, and this can show up as getting poor sleep, refusing to exercise, eating unhealthy foods, failing to maintain basic hygiene are all signs of this. Mental neglect, which is refusing, avoiding, or failing to confront psychological health issues such as anxiety, depression, OCD, overcompulsive disorder. You think about that, the physical neglect, maybe those are items that some of us are able to manage a little bit better than others. Sometimes we're so, maybe depending on what's going on in our situation, so deep in the hole that even taking care of those outward things are a struggle. But mental neglect, this is something sometimes that more often than not can be overlooked or can be held down, especially if we're ones who keep ourselves busy at certain times of the day, and then we fall into some of these other behaviors. So again, this is a matter of these symptoms. And next, we'll cover some reasons about really why we might fall into these types of behaviors. So there are a few reasons that we might participate in self-sabotaging behavior. A lot could be said about those different reasons. Maybe one of the main ones or initial ones would be an all-encompassing sense or lack of self-worth. And one of the ways that this shows up in the way of a self-sabotaging behavior is shown with cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance refers to our brain's way of thinking or attaching a meaning to something that has happened, our feeling about it, and then basically inwardly making it make sense, if you will. Dissonance refers to a lack of agreement. So there might be a thought that I have generally about something. There's something that happens, maybe my feelings get hurt about something, or there's an action that takes place, and inwardly I have to reconcile or make that make sense in my mind. And so cognitive dissonance refers to our brain trying to make things make sense. Obviously, our brain very much helps us out in trying to categorize things, which helps for storing and easy retrieval of information. But as it shows up to inward things such as how we view ourselves, how we view other people, if we're not present and conscientious, it sometimes can work against us. And so in the way of a self-sabotaging example, how does cognitive dissonance, how can it be exemplified? Let's say that I have a coworker named Johnny that I don't particularly care for. And one day Johnny offers to get me coffee. He says, "Hey, I'm going to go get some coffee. You want me to get you some? It's my treat." And there are two options that I could go along with Johnny offering me to get me coffee. Option one could be, you know what? I guess Johnny's not so bad after all. Even though, I don't particularly care for him, but he offered something, maybe he's not so bad after all. Option two could be that I feel like, you know what, why has Johnny offered me something? He must have some kind of agenda, because otherwise, why would he be offering me something? And so, depending on which option, which thought I land on, my brain is going to cling to that, and that's going to dictate my actions, and specifically likely my interaction or lack thereof with Johnny, because I've clung to what has happened. There's a pattern that gets built, and then I just cling to that thought and make decisions based off of that. So that's an example of cognitive dissonance working or exemplified in our situation. Another reason that we might enter into self-sabotaging behavior could be imposter syndrome. So maybe at certain points in our lives we start to become successful, whether it's professionally or otherwise, and we get to a certain point and we feel like, man, I don't know if I'm deserving of the success that's coming forth. We might start to feel like, oh, this is not, I'm not, I shouldn't be here, or a person like me shouldn't be here, or why is it happening to me, even though something successful is happening. But we might have this sense of not being deserving, and thus feeling like, imposter syndrome is encroaching. Another major reason why we might enter into self-sabotaging behavior could be that there's comfort in pain. So although the self-sabotaging self-sabotaging behavior doesn't make us happy, doesn't make us feel good, because it's familiar, there's some type of comfort in that. When we break it down, you feel like, oh, that doesn't make sense, but it plays out in our situation so much. Also, it might be something that we do when we're bored. So, maybe if I feel like there's not much going on, I might revert to things there might even be a rush that I sense when I do certain things, inflame certain situations, do certain actions that, again, I know that's self-sabotaging and not good for me, but I feel like I get some type of sensation short term with that being just from being bored and deciding I'm going to enter into, again, something that's familiar. So you might feel like, how do we stop the madness then? If that's the case, well, pinpointing your pattern is how we stop the madness. Pinpointing my pattern is how we stop the madness. And it's good to consider, the awareness of, because, self-sabotaging behaviors, they follow a pattern by and large. And so awareness of the pattern is so helpful, because then that's how you can jump in front of it and say, okay, these are the sequence of events, or this is the action that takes place. And if I recognize when it happens, then I can nip it in the bud. I can say, I'm not doing that in this situation. This is what I normally do, and I'm following in the path that I normally follow, but I'm not doing it in this situation. So let's say, and it's really good because we can also, even a step back, know what our triggers are. What are things that we're like, ooh, that's something that stresses me out, or that's something that, I've kind of already developed a narrative related to, that when this happens, this is what I normally do. Whatever the narrative is that's playing in our mind, then we can really start to address it. So let's say, for example, example that I have is, let's say there's a coffee shop, another coffee example. Sorry for the theme with coffee. Let's say that there's a barista at a coffee shop that normally helps you out. Y'all usually have some type of brief interaction and conversation when you go in, besides the barista making your coffee and completing the transaction. And there's a little crush, and definitely seems mutual. And at one point, the barista asks you if you'd like to go on a date with them. And you might, again, there are options inwardly presented. You, of course, could say yes, absolutely, or you could, maybe kind of panic a little bit inwardly and decide, oh, well, no, if I go out on a date with this person, then this is going to happen. And then, we like each other, but what if at some point they don't like this about me, or I don't like this about them? And then where there's mutual appreciation, before things have even started, you've basically talked yourself out of accepting a date, getting to know this individual, enjoying their company and them enjoying yours, and all because you've really kind of the cognitive dissonance, working, starting to operate there, where you say, hey, they're probably gonna, cause me trouble anyways, maybe hurt, especially if I've had that or negative situations that have happened in a past or romantic situation. So, but all of this happened, these two options, either saying yes, which could come out of recognizing a pattern, or if I have a pattern because I realize I have all these thoughts about it, I could say, you know what, and maybe I stop. If I go with that second one, maybe I stop going to the shop. Maybe I start becoming short in my interaction with the barista. All because of having this narrative that was playing, thus a self-sabotaging behavior coming forth. So after you pinpoint your pattern, what's next is that we face and embrace our fears. We get intimate, if you will, with our fears. Our self-sabotaging behavior is really a misdirected form of self-love. Our brain thinks that it's protecting us, by doing X, Y, and Z when we maybe get triggered by something, but it's actually just holding us back many times from our potential, and being able to take advantage of situations. Fear really is an emotion that can cause us to sweep all kinds of things under the rug. And so in terms of facing what makes us fearful, a great way of acknowledging and facing those fears, and one recommendation is journaling. In the last maybe 9 to 12 months, this has been huge for me, and it's still a struggle for me. I'm going to be honest. It's still a struggle for me. A journal that I have been using, not a paid ad, she doesn't know me from Adam, but I definitely recommend it to my clients that I've been working with, health coaching clients I've been working with. In the last year, I've also offered that as well, is Alex L's, her journal. I'll actually drop a link for it in the front. I should have brought it with me for you all to take advantage of this awesome journal. And she's actually released a couple of them, so I will make sure to share the name of the one that I'm talking to. But I've used one of hers, and it's been great because they're actually writing prompts, and the prompts are so good because they're even written and asked in such a way that it causes you to dig. And so, sometimes I'm like, oh, but it's so good. So I will drop that for you. But journaling, even if it's you just writing things down, maybe even if you're just starting today, you can write them down. And so a couple of questions that will help you out with this, because the next time that you realize that you're procrastinating, delaying, picking fights with loved ones, which are other kinds of self-sabotaging behaviors, especially that can come forth when you're triggered or realize fear is rising up about something in your interactions, is what am I scared of and why is this scary? And then you also could ask yourself, in the worst case scenario that it happened, that what I'm fearful of happens, could I handle it? Does this fear outweigh my desires? So a few good questions that I'll ask again, just so you can make note of them. What am I scared of? Why is this scary? Worst case scenario, if it happened, could I handle it? And then finally, does this fear outweigh my desires? Does this fear outweigh my desires? Good to notate and notate those questions, as well as what your answers are to these things that you could be fearful of. And once you've taken these steps, realize what those fears are, you can acknowledge them head on. And those fears, each and every time that you acknowledge them, they lose a little bit of power in your psyche, which is by and large where it's all operating at to begin with. So after embracing, or as we're acknowledging and embracing our fears head on, little by little, taking power away from those fears, and the stronghold they have on our psyche, how can we continue to make some headway? I'll end this video with saying we can recommit to new healthy goals every day, and we can set small ones. And crossing things off of, so setting goals, things that we want to accomplish, is very powerful. It adds confidence, and it could be small goals. So again, even why, as I even did this video series, is because of the time of year that we're at. There are things that we are seeking to accomplish, maybe professionally, personally, small goals, big goals as we look, into the spring, into the summer, and into the fall. We'll blink and it'll be 2023. But whatever the case might be, I encourage you to set some small goals. This is a first way to commit to new and healthy habits, which will really help us in feeling accomplished. And so you can write this down in a planner. You can write this down in a notepad. Checking items off is helpful for us. So it could be things such as your day-to-day small obligations, for example. Maybe going to the grocery store, picking up dog food. These are items, and all of our situations are different. What are some small tasks that we can complete that once we mark them off, they're tangible? Once we mark them off, we feel like, okay, there's some accomplishment that has come along with that. It seems odd. It seems like a weird way, like, Dayla, my to-do list is so long. How is that going to help me out? But if I'm just focusing on maybe even 2 or 3 items, whatever it is that's calling my name, 2 or 3 items, I knock those off. Having knocked those off, I feel there's some sense of accomplishment. Power's added. So power is taken away from fear, and power is added to I'm decisively and intentionally knocking things out. So I'll end with this first one, but we will continue along this line next week. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.